Okay. As we well know, the number 3 by the Rebbe is very special. As the Rebbe says in the Mishnah, Istakel b'shloisha dvorim, so the Rebbe says the first thing is Istakel b'shloisha, to look at the concept of the 3, this whole concept of 3. Without great preliminaries onto this, without great expansion on the subject of 3, but as we know, the main emphasis the Rebbe says about 3 is all that 3 represents the concept of achdus. And this is the special quality of 3, that brings about achdus when there seems to be different opinions. When we're talking about Gimel Tmuz, obviously the number 3 is quite prevalent. Chav Zayin, we also know the Rebbe speaks about Chav Zayin represents 3 times 3 times 3. Can you do the Sicha? And Bashgacha Pratis, as frightening as it sounds, but this time there's also another 3 Yiddish Kinderloch that need an immediate Geula, and all of Klal Yisrael obviously needs an immediate Geula. So the idea of 3 is something that we should focus on continuously, as the Rebbe says, that 3 represents also the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, which we are all anxiously awaiting and expecting to happen any moment. So, in this idea, aside we should learn the Sikha, where the Rebbe speaks about this concept of 3, but in a different perspective, in a different angle. This is actually what you have in front of you is from a sefer called Hine Yomim Boim, an excellent sefer, highly recommended to get it. It's all based on Sichas Mamorim Monoch Chassidus, very well done. This basically it's a gist of a Sicha of Chelik Tes Vav Vayetzim. But I took it from here, it's structured a little bit differently. So in the Sicha the Rebbe says like this. Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi yesh kesher miyuchad leYaakov Avinu. Special connection to the Beis HaMikdash with Yaakov. As it says, Ma'idich Siv al Chamim Rabim El Har Hashem El Beis Elokei Yaakov. Pasuk says the nations will say, "Let us go up to Har Hashem El Beis Elokei Yaakov." Says the Gemara over there. Elokei Yaakov Eloi Elokei Avraham v'Yitzchak. In fact, Rashi brings it as a chumash. Says, why does it say only Elokei Yaakov and it doesn't say Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, which is the standard way in davening, where we say Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. So the Gemara says, like Avraham shekosav b'har. Avraham Avinu, when he refers to the Har HaBayis, that we call the Har HaBayis, there he doesn't speak, when he went to the Akedah, he doesn't speak about Bayis, he refers to it Har. Asher Yomer Hayoy B'Har Hashem Yirah. Avraham Avinu speaks about this Gila Lekus that he had on that space. He speaks about it in terms of Har. V'loiki Yitzchak shekosav b'Sodeh. By Yitzchak he says when he went up to this place, he says Vayetze Yitzchak lasuach b'Sodeh. Is there in Yitzchak uses the term Sodeh. And Elokei Yaakov, the only one who actually called this place Shekol Bayis. The only one who called it Bayis is Yaakov. Shenema Vayikra Hashem Hamokem Ahu Beiske. Yaakov Avinu, when he has his dream, that's when he refers to this place Bayis. So therefore, when the pasuk says the nation will say, "Let us go to Har HaBayis," it could only refer to Yaakov Avinu, that he's the one who calls it Bayis. She says, what's the difference if it's called Bayis or Har HaSodeh? So we have to understand what's the quality, what's the milah, what's the virtue of calling it Bayis instead of Har HaSodeh, as well, and why is it Dafki Yaakov that he's the one who calls it Bayis? So he says, brings the Mashal, that Shloishes Bot HaMikdash is Makbilim L'Shleishes Avis. The 3 Beis HaMikdash refer to the 3 Avis. Beis HaMikdash HaRishon Hu Keneged Avraham, Beis HaMikdash HaSheni Mechuven Keneged Yitzchak, Beis HaShlishi Yibane B'Schus Hashem Yaakov. Is Kol Echad Me'Avis Is Yaches L'Mokem HaMikdash Behesem Lo Yiseh Beis HaMikdash HaShayach Elu. Each one refers to the place, to the Beis HaMikdash, which is more in rapport, how do we say, in connection with his state. And he explains. The Beis HaRishon HaSheni Shenivnu B'Zchus Avraham v'Yitzchak Shosa Shechina B'Ofen Zmani. The Beis HaMikdash HaRishon HaSheni were all temporary. Mugbo. Mishum Kach. Avraham v'Yitzchak Mishtamshim B'Loshen Har V'Sodeh. Makom she'ein Adam Dor B'hem B'Kviyas. The parallel which we have between Sodeh and Har, both of them are places that people can be. We go on the mountains, we go out to the field, but it's more representing a temporary state of being. It's not a permanent dwelling, it's not a permanent home. It represents more a temporary presence. So the Beis HaMikdash HaRishon and the Beis HaMikdash HaSheni, both of them unfortunately were just temporary, both of them were cold, both of them were movable in a certain way. Therefore, there, Yaakov Avraham Avinu speaks in terms of Har, and Yitzchak in terms of Sodeh. Mashen kinabel u'mosav noikit Yaakov loshen bayis. Yaakov Avinu refers the term, uses the term bayis. Why? Ki hu misyaches lebayis hashlishi. Shemakbel elav. The third Beis HaMikdash is related to Yaakov, and therefore the bayis hashlishi tishra shchina b'ofen nitzchi leloi hefsek. The bayis hashlishi will be a permanent one. Just like a home is a permanent dwelling of a person, so to the Beis HaMikdash, Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi represents the concept of nitchis, and therefore it's called bayis. So it continues. As Shaychusish and Amusik Blik Vul Yankov, this concept of Blik Vul, of eternity, of nitchis, we see this by Yaakov Avinu in different places. So it talks about the Parsha Vayetze. There we also find the Bichlas Hashem to Yaakov. The bracha that Eibishter is giving to Yaakov regarding Eretz Yisrael. There it says, "Uforatz the Yom HaVekeinu v'Tzavoyin v'Negba." As it says the other pasuk, "V'achalticho nachlis Yaakov avicho," steht in Yeshaya, Nachla means Nachla b'li Mitzorim. So lo yikav shekosu boi kumis halach be'oretz l'or kol orachbo. Although it says, although it was promised, but there was a certain limitation on it. The only one, so this, in other words, all over, taking everything without Akbalas, this is Shaykh to Yankov. And this bracha is Menegei the Gula, Oz, and it says, this Pasha Teretz Yisrael, Chol Olam Kuloi, Leloi Gvulos. So this is where we see by Yaakov Avinu the Indian on Akbar. So he says, on the Roy Neifoy, Kehen Betchum Azman, in terms of time, the Nitzris of Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, and Hen Betchum Amokim also in place, Nachla B'lim Tzorim, so Yaakov Misameles Heder Akbalas Ein Sofis. Yaakov is the one who represents, who symbolizes the concept of Ein Sof. I guess because of political correctness in this particular sefer, he didn't put in the obvious concept that we find about Yaakov loy meis, which we find in of nitzchis. I guess for obvious reasons he didn't want to put it in here, but l'chura that's quite obvious that this belongs over here, the concept of the nitzchis in Zman. So the question becomes, what? I don't remember. So Madua Yaakov, so he asked the question, Madua Yaakov, who had Yatzik has pashtus ability for this. He says, let's understand the specific connection between Yaakov in Blikvul, in Nitzchi, and Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi. So he brings over here a beautiful Alshach. The Alshach, he says, Alshach HaKodesh is usually called, is Mazbah. Shebeyankiv Motzinu Shlemus B'Yechedes. By Yankiv Avinu we find this concept of Shlemus more than we do not find by Avraham and Yitzchak. How so? By Yaakov we find Mitosa Shlemus. B'chol Zar Elohei Apsud. L'Avraham, Leled Yishmael. L'Yitzchak, Leled Esau. Rak Yaakov Kol Bonov Hoyu Tzadikim. So we find already by Yaakov the meaning of Shlemus. So Mishum Kach. Bayis HaRishon Shenivne B'Zchus Avraham, הויסי יחנס בידי זרים להקריבו. כשם שישמעאל שהיה ראשו, קיבל את כוחו מאברהם. Since Yishmael did get a certain koyach from Avraham Avinu, so therefore he was able to bring about the Churban Bayis. And as it says, noch an Altschach Mitzay, shebeis ha-Churban beis ha-Mikdash ha-Rishon, Sobel Am Yisrael, Tzorech Boifim Miyuchad, meis Bnei Yishmael. There was a particular, the Bnei Yishmael were the one at that time who gave us a hard time. It says, B'doy Melekach, the same thing we find also by Bayis Sheni. Esav HaRasha, Kibel Keches miYitzchak. Esav who comes from Yitzchak. The Kach Bayis Sheni. Sheyesh l'shayches miyuchedes liYitzchak. Bayis Sheni, as we said, is referring to, has a special connection to Yitzchak. So the tzoros that came in Bayis Sheni, shol to Bnei Edom. Malchus Roime v'chido Yosef, who are from Esav. So we see over here how the one who came to bring about the Golus, the Churban of Bayis Rishon, is related to Avraham. And Bayis Sheni connected to Yitzchak. So says the Altshach continues, Rak mi Yainkiv lo yoysa Yunika, lekeches harav atuma. Mishum, Yainkiv Avinu, there was nothing that came up from him that it gave strength, that gave koiches to Klippa. Mishum shekol bon of hem b'tzad ha'kedusha. Ub'makbil lekach, concurrent with that obviously, Yibane v'samikdash ha'shlishi, shelo yuchlu lo yedei zon. That nobody will be able to destroy. And this will be existing eternally. That's where we see, first of all, that Bianchi Mitzad Mitosu Shlemo, therefore by MZ, when we see the concept of Nitzah. It says, based on that, the Gala Altshich Emek Chodesh B'Tfilosa Shel Yaakov B'Makam HaMikdash. The Altshich is revealing a deep concept about his tefillah. When he had his dream on the place that he called Beis Keil, the Bayis, and he says like this: when Yaakov was on his way to go to Lavan, Yaakov finds himself in a particular situation. Where Shem is Hala Belimud Akeva Benis Hashem, he's just coming from Yeshiva, from Shem Be'ever. And Vu Gater, the Yoitzel Oilam HaGadol is going out to the big world. He's going to have to deal with Alavan. What is he going there for? He's leaving the comfort, the security, the protection of Shem Be'ever, and he's leaving the home of Yitzchak to go where? To fight in the world. What is he going to do? Live no his Bayis and Hakim Mishpacha. That's what his mother sent him for, to go build a home, build the Klal Yisrael. Ubaderech, on the way, he passes and he starts in Makam HaMikdash. Sagt also, Yaakov nu yodea shebeis HaMikdash Rishon Yivane b'schus Avraham, v'yechorv lebesof. He knew that the first Beis HaMikdash will be built in the merit of Avraham, but will be destroyed. And the same thing, Yidola Gamkin al Kach Shabayis Hasheni leYasnu b'kiyumoy. He knew the same thing by the second Beis HaMikdash. So now, so Yaakov Avinu is thinking, what's going to happen with the third Beis HaMikdash? Which will be built in Ischus. Will this have Kiyum Nitzri or not? This will depend on the Hashpah that Yaakov had on Zara. But he is to be Zara Kochas Araba Varesha. Aresha Beis HaMikdash Yishol Netzach B'Dag Dusha. If they will all be Mitosu Shleimo, as we know the Lashon, then you know that this will be eternal. But there will not be any Zolim that could have any effect, could have any power on the Beis HaMikdash. But V'im Cholilo Le'yatzliach, Tova Chas V'Sholem, Yaakov Avinu will not succeed. V'im Psul B'Zaroi, Aresha Goyrel Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, Yeh Goyrel HaBayis HaMikdash HaSheni. Then Chas V'Sholem, the same thing which happened to the first and the second, could Chas V'Sholem also happen to the third. With these thoughts, with these thoughts, Yaakov Avinu is mispalel on the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi. And what is it mispalel? The goyrel of the Beis Hamikdash Shlishi should not be the same as the first two. Sagt Le'oila Amur, based on that, Nucha Lo'havin Gam is a Sibur Lekach Sheyayki is Palat Dafke Be'erev. As we know, Avraham Avinu was the Taken Gewen, Shkoyach, has established that Mesaken Gewen Shachis, Yitzchak hat Mesaken Gewen Mincha, and Yaakov hat Mesaken Gewen Meilut. Sagt Pavos. As it says, Avraham Avinu Tiknes Vilis Shachis, Yashkim Avraham Babeker, Yitzchak Tiknes Vilis HaMincha, K'meshanema, ויצא יצחק לסור בסודה לפני עורב, מנחתיים, ויינקיב תיקנס תילס ארבס. As it says, ויבדק במוקים ויולן שור. When it's the time ויולן שור, is then, ועוז יספר. sagt זה מסביר הרשך. שלישס אורבס, הספרלו במוקים המקדוש. אברהם, יצחק, יעקב, they all prayed, they all davened, they all מספרלו כבין במוקים המקדוש. אברהם הספרלו בבקר ביס המקדוש הראשון. The Beis Hamikdash Rishon shenivna b'boiker. The Beis Hamikdash Rishon was built in the morning, as it says, betchilas ha'elef ha'reviyah lebrias ha'olam. Yitzchak is bal lifnois erev al Beis Hamikdash ha'sheni shenivna likras siyum shel erev ha'reviyah. Aval ha'tfilah shel shneim lo niskablu b'shlemus. The tefillah, although they also prayed obviously that it should be Nitzri, was not accepted. Ulebsov hichshecha yanodani v'dvorim finster. War der Gottes. Habei so rish na shene nichvu. Wie Israel halche le Gottes. Mit echmatzim zeh shel chesher v'afel. La'achar choben bei so shene. Noch kommt mit Yaakov und Mispalel, shekasher yoyirayem, Yaakov Avinu is Mispalel when it's dark. Yaakov Avinu is Mispalel when it's Gottes. Yaakov Avinu is Mispalel by Lovan. This is a more with different places explained further. Where was he Mispalel? Where actually he was Mispalel of Arabayis, but where was his avodah? He's going to explain later. There was his Mispalel that when it will become day, so then was the Beis Hamikdash sein, oil nitzchish is kein Lord. And here he gives a very interesting point. I think very, let's say, painfully apropos to us. His Karmi says, Ki nitzchis hamikdosh tuluya b'midas hashpah al Yaakov Avinu. The eternity, the nitzchis of Beis Hamikdash is depending on the effect, the hashpah that Yaakov Avinu will have on his children. So Yaakov did something about it. Yaakov was concerned about how his children will behave. And he knew the behavior of the children will make the whole difference if it's going to be nitzchi or not. So what did he do? He did something. So first Chazal explain what is the whole explanation of the Lekichas Avonim. Shenisachdu le'evan achas. As we know, Yaakov took Avnei HaMokim, as Medrash says, he took 12 stones, and then in the morning it says, sie geworden ein Stein. It became one stone. Shenisachdu le'evan achas. So he says, Avraham yotzim meine Pselis Yishmoel v'chol b'nei Keturah. Yitzchak yotzim meine Esav v'chol alufa. V'ani, sagt im is achoy shtei avonim zu lezu. If those stones, these multiple stones, will be unified into one stone, then I know, yodei ani she'ein yotzas in meine Pselis. Then I know that it will be nitzchi. Then I know it will be shlemis. And this is how Yaakov is going to sleep. How so? Hoping that the Eibishter will respond to his tefillah. That what? There should become an achdus among his 12 stones. And indeed, all the stones became one stone. So Yaakov Avinu saw in the morning, when Yaakov Avinu saw that all these 12 stones that originally defined in other words, I know exactly where the tzaddik's head should be. The tzaddik has to go according to my way of thinking. I know how Yaakov is going to accomplish. And this is what all 12 of them said. So for this Yaakov will not marry God. But when he saw that all those became one unit, in other words, understanding that together Yaakov Avinu will accomplish, a devil Yaakov Avinu knew that he will succeed. And indeed he succeeded. I don't think it needs much explanation to what it says to us. So it continues. Yankov Zoichel is Galus Elokis B'chaloimo. In his dream he sees Gil Elokus. Was that? HaKadosh Baruch Hu mar lo es Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi shekosher elov. וכך הוא מזווד למאוס ובניון של הבייס. So he says, what is it? What is this bayis supposed to be? L'choyrosh, first of all, Horoya sees Gizel Lohoya bayis Gashmi Greda. It's not going to be just a physical building, a Gashmistic building, Shenivne B'nei Adam that's built by human beings. Kamoya bayis Rishon Hashem. It will be bayis Ruchni. It's going to be a Ruchnistic house. Shashem Yisborach Yored Oisem Min HaShemayim V'Yamid Oisem Ba'oretz. As the Alshach explains, what does it mean? This is the meaning of the Pasuk. V'yachalem v'hini sulam mutzav arzo v'roishem magiah shamaymo. Mitzad echad, sagt er, was ist mutzav arzo v'roishem magiah shamaymo? Mitzad echad, from one perspective, it is zabayis shemutzav beretz hagashmis. It's a gashmis the gebinyan. But from the other side, the himzo is nevertheless b'ma'alose aruchnis is roishem magiah shamaymo. From a ruchnistic perspective, roishem magiah shamaymo. Which means Hashemayim. Kasher hakavon lemadrig elyon me'oid ha'ois hey she'ois be'asaf hamila Hashemayim. The letter, the hey, which is added not Hashemayim, but Hashemayim represents what? Madgisho shemedubo kan lo ibestam Shemayim. We're not talking just reaching the heaven, but it's reaching the darga elyon b'miyuchat shekayem b'Shemayim. In the highest level of Shemayim, where it could reach. So that's the first thing that he sees. He sees that over here the Beis HaMikdash will be a complete fusion between Gashmis and Ruchnis. Second thing he sees, V'hine Malach Elikim Elim V'yerdem Beh. Malach Elikim Bohem Evorem Shiftom L'Reises Is Galus Elokus Shemeiro Bebeis HaMikdash. The Malachim are coming to see what's to the Beis HaMikdash. And then they go back. They keep on going back and forth, coming to Rav Nugilui with this Beis HaMikdash. Then he says further another thing. Havaya Nitzavol. Oy Malin Niflot here in the Beis HaShlishi continues the Alshach. Another tremendous quality is going to be in the Beis HaShlishi. Ein kan rak hashro shel hashchina boiset hageshoyet so the Beis HaMikdash b'bot HaMikdash shelefonov. It will not be only the same what we had in the first and the second Beis HaMikdash. Eliyoy bo Shem Havaya shekidu roimers v'darga lekiz geboy b'yosef. He sees over there, in other words, it's a very high level of Gil Elokus. Obviously, the Alshach doesn't speak it in terms of Chassidus, that we have time and see later. So it continues. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer Yankov, Onoichi Elokei Avram, Avicha v'Elokei Yitzchak. Kiloimar says the Alshach, what does it mean? Avram v'Yitzchak chashuvim u'lefanai. Avram and Yitzchak are very important to me. U'b'schusam nivna b'Yisrael v'Hashemi. Nevertheless, Afal became an imchaviv chavivis miyuchedes davka Israel. I have a specific chavivis, the tire kind. What? Endearment. To you, Yankov. Why so? Zakt. And therefore, since I have a special endearment, I have a special feeling towards you, Yankov. Ha'oretz ha'sharato shoichet v'oleo. So he says, "Amokim shatanim tziboy, bakim hamikdash. Yinotzim dafka l'chol b'maton admuro." L'Avram v'Yitzchak nitten in hamikdash ba'ashol was on the loan. Why was it temporary? U'lebesof nilkach mehem b'bayis nichtav. Aber rak v'Yankov nois HaKadosh Baruch es makim hamikdash b'maton v'kinyan nitzch. So this is the difference between Avram, Yitzchak, and Yankov. That to them was only given on the temporary space, on the temporary way. But the Yankov was given on a permanent. Just going to continue this little piece here. And she calls it Tolu Ka'amur. Bekach Shezavah Shel Yankov Yeh Sholem. All this is depending on what? That Yankov should be Sholem V'leyei Tzim Mimeni P'sul. Bekach Sholekach Mamshech HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Avtachosoi. In connection with the Shleimus of Yankov Avinu, it's a Maftiach Moya Zarach Kafara Oretz. Ein lecha b'malach, you have nothing to be afraid of. Shkein zarach yir ka'afra. Says ka'ois ha'afra yadua shememeni nitva adam harishon. She'ad lechet etz hadas yukodesh v'toy, kach yir zarach. the special bracha, the special holiness of the kingdom of Yaakov Avinu. והקדוש ברוך הוא מסך ומבטיח ליעקב, עליו שבונך יבולד בחוץ לארץ, although your children will be born in חוץ לארץ, הרי לגביך כל העולם יחוש מבחינת ארץ ישראל. As far as you're concerned, the whole world is ארץ ישראל. שכן ופרץ ליום וכן וצפון ונגבו. כל מקום שאתה תלך בתמשון מבחינת רוחניס. ולכן גם במקומות הנחוסים ביוסר, even the lowest places, יגודל זרחת בקדושו, ונברכו בכל כל משפחה ישראל, אדם ובזרח. ועדיין, in the meantime, לא ינוח הדעתו של יעקב, יעקב is still not relaxed. עדיין הוא חושב שבהליכה is born of the Godus. Yaakov Avinu is still afraid that by the fact that his children would have to go in Godus, לאחר חורבן הבית הראשון והשני, הם יסערו בגויים וילמדו במעשיהם. פריי בזה is afraid אם כך here, הרי שמעלות הנפלא של בית השלישי, לא יטויל איש, won't help anything. והנה זה ממשיך, הקדוש ברוך הוא מבטיח. This is what the Eibishter is promising to Yaakov Avinu. והנה אנוכי עמך, ושמרתיך בכל אשר תלך, ואשר לא יסיך אל אדם הזויס. Why? I will bring you back. Why? כי לא אעזוב עד אשר למוסיסי, איזה אשר דיברתי לך. I will not let you go. I promise, I will not let you. I will not forsake you until I can finish, complete my promise to you. גם אם בני ישראל יוד וחלולו, לדיוטה התחתונה, if חס ושלום you will go to the lowest level, הרי בסופו של דבר, יקום הפוסק, the posik will be fulfilled. ואשר לא יסיך אל האדם הזויס. אבי לך. I will bring about שהם יעשו תשובה ויגלו, they will hold the תשובה. ובלושן הרמב"ם, הבטיח אותו שסוף ישראל נעשה תשובה בסייף גלוסו, ומיד אין יגון. The Torah is promising, the Rambam says, there's no question that we'll do tshuva. Just to conclude that we don't have time to go through the whole thing, you're welcome to learn it yourself. Just one interesting point which is explained, I don't remember where I saw it, that the Alshach asks a question, Taka, why was Yaakov the one who was Zoicher more than Avraham Yitzchak that he should be Mitzvah Shlema? So he says an interesting point. Davka because he worked by Lavan. Davka was in a time of Ma'ariv. Because Yaakov Avinu, where did he build Am Yisrael? Where did he build the Shvatim? Avraham Avinu had it relatively easy. Yitzchak had it relatively, so to say, more protected. Yaakov Avinu had sich gefunden by Lavan. Lavan, which was all about the deepest clipper. A place of Sheker, Lavan was, what could you do, what Lavan represents. Nevertheless, in such a time, in a time of such darkness, Yaakov Avinu was able to build the Shifte Hashem, the Shifte Kol, the Faris Mitzvah Shlema, and the Faris Zecher to the Minyan of Nitzchis. I think it's quite obvious, quite clear that it speaks to us. Dafki in our time, in a time of such a great chayshech, whatever way we want to term it, whatever way one wants to relate to this time, it is a time that we don't see and we don't hear the Rebbe directly speaking. We don't. The Rebbe's heard, Tov ala bracha. Ich hab nicht. Ich seh nicht. So in such a time, when it is such an error, it is so dark, and we are doing exactly what the Rebbe tells us to do. We are continuing doing our shlichus, which the Rebbe says, what is our shlichus? To overcome the nisyonis. Avoidance of Berulim has concluded. What do we have now? The nisoyin, our nisoyin. How do I welcome Mashiach? The Rebbe doesn't tell us we should bring Mashiach. Was ist jetzt der Avede? Mashiach is here. We have to bring him into our lives. In other words, this is a pnimistic Avede with ourselves. This is a very difficult Avede in such a man of Nisoyin, in such a time of darkness. When we do this, there's no question about it. Then any moment, as we just learned, as a Tichot Torah, mit sich mit dem Rebbe, any moment, wo you go in.
Ich gehe auf Zusche, ankommen ein bisschen später gefahren mit der Rav Shapiro von der Flame, aber ich bin sehr, dass der Junge stark zugehört sich zu. Yeah. The Seder will be now, there will be two parts, which we have the honor to have with us Choshev Rosh Hashiva, Shem Yom, talking about 40 years, Lamadal, them years, 40 years. 40 years Rosh Hashiva and Yeshiva Gedel from Miami, Harav Hagon and Rav Leibel Shapiro, which is going to speak to us. First part will be Mishnoster Shal Rebbe, the Rebbe's Uftu in ganz Leben, Nigla de Teira, and then we'll break for Mincha, and the second part will be a very interesting part. He'll give us, Rav Shapiro was Zeicha, that he was one of the Amudei HaTavach in the preparing the Likutei Sichos, the Anochos and everything, and he had first-hand relationship and remarks from the Rebbe and how to proceed and so on and so forth. So please join me in welcoming Harav Hagon, Harav Shapiro.
Just coming from the plane, came out just off, running right back afterwards back to Miami. So, and coming here after a Shabbos that we had in Florida, we had Gansanasha, Florida. I mean, it wasn't Gansanasha, but they had a special Shabbos Achana for the Tommy, the Shabbaton in the hotel, which we had 1,150 people of just Florida people. I mean, with kids, man. So I'm still a little bit, if you want to call it, a little bit under the influence. So if I talk and it doesn't make any sense, you'll understand why. Anyway, the first thing that we're going to discuss is what we call it Mishnosa Shel Rebbe. And basically we're talking about the Nigla part that we see in the Rebbe's Derech HaLimud to see how the Rebbe approached certain things in learning. We're not going into here that the Rebbe's Derech was to be with Diyukim and all this. These are all other protim. I'm going to go just to negate the Derech HaLimud of the Rebbe. We know that the Rebbe writes in a letter himself that Yedua, that Darki B'limud is the Derech of the Ragachover. That's what the Rebbe writes. That my way of learning is the Derech of the Ragachover. So what we have to see is look a little bit into the Derech of the Ragachover and apply it to see how it fits in the Rebbe's Sichos. And then we'll see, I'll use an example of one thing, the way there is a thread that goes through many Sichos in many places in Derech and Nigla, the way the Rebbe approaches different things. Now we know B'chlal, there are no two drochim in Limud in der Welt, in Nigla. There's what they call the Derech HaNituach, and then the Derech HaChrifus. Derech HaNituach is when you come, Nituach means to cut. When you, Lamoshel, see a stire, there's a contradiction, two Rambams, two halachas, which not the same halacha, but very similar. And in one halacha it's the din like this, the other halacha the din is differently. Why? Why is the din different here? So the derech hanituach, what it'll do is, if you go with that derech, you start analyzing. That's what it is. It's a derech of analyzing. Analyze each case separately. Look into the details of each case, and then you'll see there are certain pratim in which one is different than the other. And that will be the key why the halacha here is like this, halacha is like that. So you have to break it up into protim and protim till you come to understand that because of this and this prat, here the halacha is chayiv, here the halacha is poter. Even though ba'efen kloli, ba'efen makifi, superficially you look at the two, they're basically the same. Darf man reinklemmen, look deeper. You don't just rely on the way it looks, the makif. And when you look into the protim, you will come to understand that because of these and these protein, that's why the halacha changes. That's a taich derech hanituach. You analyze the cases. Then there is another derech, which is derech of chrifus, which is more known as the Polish derech. That when you have a stira in two cases, you look at it, ba'ef makifi, that's what they look. Oh, it looks pretty the same. How come here you're chayiv and here you're poter? You come up with a chrifus, they can think of it. Here is there's der man domer, this is that man, and or you come up with this hamtzor. It's a chap, and that's how you come up, a sharp chap, and that's how you answer the kasha. Bepashtis, the way you go with derech hanituach, that you get a deeper understanding. Because when you go into derech hanituach, you're analyzing the cases, and you get to really understand the cases. By the Rebbe, we see that there is even a further step in the Derech HaNituach. And that is not looking into the Pratim. The Derech HaNituach is look into the Pratim, and when you see the Pratim, you will see the difference. It's verkehrt. By the Rebbe, it's the union of looking into the Nekudas HaTamsis. You look into the Nekuda of the Teichon of the Din, and when you look into that Nekuda, automatically you will see that there is no stira between the two, because when you see the Nekudas Inyan, you see the truth, the Inyan shine to you, and you see the truth of what this Inyan is, automatically you don't even have to find the teretz to answer the stira between this case and this case, because if you look at it from your Maila Lamata, let's call it, you look from the Sheirish Hadover, so then when you look, then automatically there comes out that there is no stira, here the din has to be like this, here the din has to be like that. Because from the Nekuda, if you look at the Nekuda, sometimes from one Nekuda could come out two Hofchim. Sometimes from one Nekuda Yisvara could come out two opposite results. I'll just use an example, not of a Vort in the Sikha, but of a certain halacha. We know in Shabbos there are different malachas. One malacha is malacha Maki B'Patish. What is the malacha of Maki B'Patish? Tikkun Keilah. What's the malacha? Every malacha has a tziyud. Someone will ask, be mitzayir to me. Describe what's malachas bishul. There's a tziyud, only way to describe it. You take food, raw food, you put it on fire, it's bishul. How do you describe the malachas ksiva? Take a pen and you write two letters. That's the tziyud of malachas ksiva. Let someone describe what's the malacha of Maki B'Patish. There is no tziyud to this malacha. Anything that a person does that will finish off the keilah, that is the malacha Maki B'Patish. You could sometimes have two opposite pu'ulas, and the both be chayav for Maki B'Patish. So sometimes when you look into the Nekuda, you could come out that two opposites are really one. Sometimes farkert, you would come out when you look into the Nekuda Satamsis, you will see that we see clearly why one case is like this, one case is like this, because when you look into the Nekuda Se'inyan, you see it. This is basically known as the chilik, but the Rebbe brings this in different places, the difference between the Derech HaLimud of the Rishonim and of the Achreinim. Why is it that we find a lot of kashas that the Achreinim has, that the Yeshua and the Achreinim has starke kashas in the Gemara. In the Rishonim we don't find such kashas, the Chura starke kashas. Why didn't the Rishonim, Chas v'Shalom, didn't think of such kashas? And what's the answer? The Rishonim saw the Chatchila, the Inyan the way it is, that L'chatchila they saw there's a difference between the cases and you can't compare the two. But it wasn't below Kasha V'Teretz. When you don't have the Nekudas HaTamsis, when you go, let's say, in Derech HaNituach, you have a Kasha, you have a Teretz. You're dealing with two cases, you have a Kasha. Then when you start dealing with the Pratim, and you come looking at it, and you see, okay, sof, when you get into the Pratim, you see this Prat, they're different Pratim, and maybe they're different. Here it's forget, L'chatchila, you look Mamayla Lamata, and you see L'chatchila Demes, and there's no kasha to begin with. So the Rishonim, these kasha that Achreinim asked, didn't ask because they saw the Chatchila the Emes. The Achreinim didn't see that way, and they have to go with the kasha of the Teretz. There's a story about the Rebbe, that there was once a chassid came to the Alter Rebbe and he said, he has a son, this is a Greisa Lampen, but a Greisa Valgaiven, and Meinteke and Goras Achlenen, and so the Alter Rebbe said, bring him to me. He came to the Alter Rebbe quoted to him something that the Marami Rutenberg writes. And he brings a raya to his din. A raya, nicht as a starke raya, but a raya. Alter Rebbe says to him, do you have any other rayas to this din? And he answered, yeah. 5 strong rayas to the din of the Marami Rutenberg. Alter Rebbe says, very good. I have 6 more rayas to the din of the Marami Rutenberg. Together 11 rayas. So then he asked him a shayla, so how come the Maram Rutenberg brought this other raya, didn't bring any of these 11 rayas, brought one raya, only Shalash Tarkim. He didn't know. So the Alter Rebbe starts going through raya by raya, shlogs up every one of the 11 rayas, and the only raya he couldn't shlog up with the raya the Maram Rutenberg brought. And then the Alter Rebbe says to him, what's meinst du? That the Maram Rutenberg thought of each one of these rayas like we did. And came with the upslug like we had. The rayas l'chatchila didn't come to him because he saw the truth. And when you look at the real truth into the Kudas Ha'inyan, you l'chatchila see it's no raya. So by the Rebbe we see that when he goes into the Masbid in Yonim and Iglim, so you see that he has a lot of times, and you have to have the voice to this, I'm just saying to close the Gevurah, that stiras that are answered is because you look into the Nekudas HaTamsis, and B'meila automatically when you see the Nekuda of the Inyan, so these two Nekudas are completely different. B'meila the Chatchila is no Shaila, and if you see the Nekuda you don't even ask a Shaila. If the Rebbe does ask a Shaila and gives us a teretz because he's Masbid in the Nekudas Inyan, that's because we need the Kasha and the teretz, because we don't see the Nekuda. But by the Rebbe Take, he saw it. They say this, that Chaim Zimmerman once got a letter from the Rebbe, and he asked the Kasha from the Rebbe, I think he wrote to the Rebbe, or the Rebbe wrote to him, I don't know. But the Rebbe wrote him a letter and answered a shaila, a few kashas in Kotchin. And he went out of the Kelim and he said, Et Mer'uiv Geloich in ganz Kotchin. And he said, I see the Rebbe's Derech HaLimud, he said it like the Rishonim, that what a word, a gang, a cook, and you see the Indian and automatically everything falls into place. But as I said before, one of the things that happens when you look at the Nekudas HaTamsis of Inyan, when you look at the Nekuda, what happens is that sometimes when you have two opposites, they're really not opposites. Because like I said before, for them, as you see the Moshul of Makib Patish, that from a Nekuda, the way it's Nistayef and Nitztayef, when it comes out into a Tzir, coming out of the Nekudas HaSeichel, sometimes you could come out two opposites, and the two opposites are really not opposites, they're really the same. Because beside the Nekuda, they look opposite, but they're not opposites. And I want to bring some examples of different inyanim where we finally look at the sichas, different inyanim where the Rebbe we see such a derech, in such inyan. Now I have a list of different places. I'll read you the marmakebis from the places. We'll start off with one. We'll go to as many as we have a chance. So what time? In Likutei Sichos Chelik Tes Vov, Sicha to Chanukah. There the Rebbe brings the Rambam, where the Rambam says that if you have Ner Shabbos or Ner Chanukah, you only can afford or get one candle, let's say, or should it go for Ner Shabbos, or should go to Ner Chanukah. So in Hilchas Chanukah, the Rambam writes that Ner Shabbos Kedem, Ner Shabbos comes first. And he says, because it's because of Shalom Bayis, you know that Ner Shabbos is for Shalom Bayis. And the Eibishter allowed his name to be erased. When it comes to Shalom Bayis, we know by a Soiter, when there's a problem, so the way to solve the problem is by writing down the Megillah, writing down certain parashas, and you erase it into the water and you give it to drink. So the Eibishter allowed to have his name erased. Why? Because of Shalom Bayis. And Shalom is so great that Kol HaTorah Kula Lenitna L'das Shalom B'Olam. The whole Torah was given to make Shalom. This is the Rambam. The Rebbe asks many questions on this Rambam, and then I'll mention a few of them, and then he goes to give a beer. One shaila is, why does the Rambam bring the extra things? He should have said Stam, Ner Shabbos and Ner Chanukah. The Shabbos is more important. It comes first. That's it. Why does he bring in Arayah from Mechikas Hashem by the Soiter? Then he goes into the whole thing that God Allah Shalom, Allah Torah, Nitna Lasa Shalom, the Torah was given to make Shalom. Why is all that important in the Rambam? The Rambam, whatever he writes is halacha. This is not a halacha. And another shaila, why does the Rambam write this in Hilchas Chanukah and not in Hilchas Shabbos? L'chura, this is Adin Shabbos. Shabbos is stronger than Chanukah. Neiras Shabbos is more important than Neiras Chanukah. So it should have been in Hilchas Shabbos, not in Hilchas Chanukah. And then the Rebbe asks, why does the Rambam change? The Gemara uses the Lashon Neiras Shabbos Odif. The Shabbos is better. And the Rambam changes and uses the Shabbos Kedem. Why? And he asks more shaylas. But these are the main Nekudas, three Nekudas, the shaylas. And I'll explain what the Nekudas Ha'inyan here is. B'chlal, we know one of the known things by yeshivas and by the way you learn Nigla, always with Chkiras. So there's one famous Chkira, which is Hutra, tchuya or hutra. When you have sometimes two things which contradict, you can't do them both together. If you're going to do one, the other one won't be good. If you do the other, this one won't be good. What do? So whatever the halacha is, one is deicha the other. The shaila is, when one is deicha the other, is it tchuya? Does it mean it's deicha, it pushes it away? Or is it hutra, is it matir it? Does it give it that? It's matir. The difference tchuya and hutra would be, tchuya means the isur is still basically there. Let's say you're aver on the isur in order to do the mitzvah. Mitzvah says, esa deicha lo isur. So you do the mitzvah, you're aver on the isur. Elamai, the Torah pushes away, the mitzvah pushes away the isur. Hutra means the mitzvah was matir the isur. To say in push the words, there is a stira here. There's a contradiction. There's a fight. There's a fight between, let's use Esdech Leisa, which the Rishonim, the Mefarshim,